Welcome, welcome, welcome. Peace. What's happening, everybody? Hey. Welcome to Soul Healing Sat saying happy Sunday. I am Stacy Patrice at Soul Yogini SP, and today we're going to talk about identity and frequency. This is something I've been thinking about all week. I was waiting for today to but been thinking about all week and just feeling the idea of why we need to talk about this right now. So I thank you all for joining, not knowing what we'll be talking about, but stick in if you can. I want to start by just saying that in this particular set saying, I want you all to really utilize the comments. I know I say that most Sundays, but this Sunday, I really want you all to utilize the comments because I do want this to be a two-way conversation because of the nature of what we're talking about and because of the nature of identification. It's important to hear everyone's perspective and everyone's voices as a part of this conversation. So typically we go from about 1 to 2. I'm going to leave a little more space than I typically do. I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to get in here and be heard. And so I'm so grateful you all are here. So let's get started. So today's set saying, I want to talk about identity. It was something that happened earlier this week that just made me realize that identity is such an important topic and is often talked over, right? And when we're discussing like what's going on with us and how we feel and who we're becoming and what's bothering us, we're really in a certain way talking about how we identify. Like, who is it that is experiencing these things? What is at stake when these things are being experienced? And so I was like, I think we should like really tap into that because identity in my world has been one of constant change, constant ebb and flow. It is not the traditional idea of identity where you feel like, oh, well, if I don't know who I am because I'm changing, then it changes who I am. But it's more fluid. We understand identity a lot differently now. And so I just want to talk about that with you all. As I'm talking in this beginning portion, feel free to go into the comments and kind of state how you identify yourself right now, because we're going to evolve that definition of the course of the conversation. So how do you identify right now? There's no right, no wrong answer, no shame, no harm, no foul. How you identify currently is just connected to your current awareness. And when I say identify, I want you to think about what that means to you. If she's saying identify, does that mean she's talking about like, what are my stats? What is my status? What are my demographics? What are my, whatever you think identification is for right now, go ahead and drop that in the comments. And the reason I'm saying this is because your identification has carried you thus far. But in order to evolve, in order to continue to bring the world that you envision into your life, you have to be able to also evolve your identification. And one of the things that I heard this week, and when I say heard, just like a download I got, is that a lot of us hold on to identifications that don't even serve us, right? So it's the idea that if I see myself in a particular way, is that my identification or is that someone else's identification of me? And am I really honored and really fulfilled in this identification? Like, is this identification something that serves me or something that hinders me? And this is a real question because a lot of times our identifications are dictated to us until we change, until we shift that. So I'm thinking of this in the terms of when I do my workshops, one of the first questions I usually ask people is, how do you identify currently? And there's a range of answers, usually anything from, I am Black, I am, this person's gender, person's race, ethnicity, nationality, lack of nationality, like lack of knowing nationality. It sometimes goes into people's roles, like, this is what I do for a living. This is how I identify myself in the world. It can also go into, internal roles like, mother, friend, sister, whatever that is. But I want you to think about identity in a more broad sense. If you couldn't use words that other people would understand and categorize you by, what are the words that you would use? And this is where I find the English language like almost completely inadequate, right? the idea that we have to pick words to describe something that's kind of intangible, because identity actually at its core is intangible. It actually is something that is hard to quantify. And we make quantification out of it so that we can connect and express and explain to others. But who you actually know yourself as is not necessarily the most descriptive kind of label or moniker, right? A lot of times, many of us have multiple identities. And I'm gonna tread on some really interesting lines here with this. When you think about who you knew yourself as a child, and then you think about who you might have known yourself as a teenager, and then you think about who you might know yourself as an adult, or, you know, an adult in this era or this decade versus the adult once some event happened, who you know yourself to be now. When you think about all of this, you realize that your identity evolves. It doesn't change who you are, but how you identify yourself may evolve. And it may evolve so that it can open up more doors for you. It may evolve so that you get to a place where you feel more understood and accepted by others. And sometimes it may evolve because there are life events that cause it to evolve for you. And so I want to think today about identity as an evolutionary right, like how we understand that who we are is changing and evolving and allowing it to change and evolve. Because so many times when we talk about identity, there's a tendency to be stuck in a particular place so that we can be accepted. And this is just baseline truth, right? Like, this is not necessarily speaking for everyone, but baseline truth in the sense that it's natural to say, this is who I am, and this helps me to do these things. So I just keep telling people this is who I am. But to me, this is where it gets really beautiful, because it's like who you're telling people you are is not only your story, but it's also your gift. It's like your broadcast, your frequency to the world. So if you're telling the world, you know, if I say I am Stacey Patrice, nobody knows what that is until I define it. If I say I am a Black American woman, then people start to conjure up images about what that is. And then they assign those and project those to me. If I say I am a healer, again, this might be a word that triggers certain feelings and understandings to people. If I say I'm a speaker, you know, that also can categorize me in a particular way. So it's like just kind of churning through those impressions until we can like really purify it and get the frequency we're looking for. That's what we're working on today. We want to get through all of those impressions. If you don't have paper, if you don't have pen, I highly, highly, highly suggest you grab it. Or if you have a tablet or something to take notes with, that's perfect. That won't interrupt this feed as it's happening. But I want you all to start with the identity that is truest for you right now. And your identity may not change over this conversation. You may have found this place before this conversation, but if you haven't, we want to work towards that. So this is something I think is so important as we start to move from where we were, like what we knew ourselves as before this entire time started to impose upon us, and then who we know ourselves as after this time. This is the bridge. Right now, we're in the bridge. We're in the bridge, and the bridge is so important, so critically important, because this is where definition starts to take shape. This is where we start to say, you know, oh, this person has this and this one doesn't. This person is able to go these places and this one isn't. These are the places you can enjoy and these are places you can't. These are the places that, you know, are open and available, and these are ones that are not. These are the kind of jobs you used to do, and now these are the jobs you do. And there's just so much bombardment of definition on us from the external, from the outside. I think it's critically important that we turn that on its head and start to identify from the inside and share that out. And it's what I see some people doing, but it's also not necessarily as crystal clear as it could be because frequency is involved. So let me pause just for a moment here and say, we want to talk about identity as a tangibility, and a tangibility meaning something you can feel, something that no one can define for you. We want to look at your identity as something that is specific and unique to you. So until you get to that specific, unique marker, we're not there yet, right? If I'm still saying I'm a woman and, you know, I am, you know, some role, if anyone else can call themselves that, and it mean the same thing, we're not there yet. And this is where being an individual is so important. Right now, we are being initiated into the greatest sense of individuation that we possibly can, like where who you are determines how you move, which also determines how you affect others based on the frequency and the representation of that. And then we're talking about if you don't do your very unique thing that makes you you, the very unique thing that makes you you, then the rest of us suffer because you haven't brought it out. Now, I know that sounds extreme, but let me step back a minute. I'm saying that each of you listening are so critically important, self-included. We are all so critically important that if we are not grasping what it is that we actually have to contribute, what it is, who it is that we actually need to broadcast to the world, if that doesn't come forth, then we actually harm everyone else by holding that back. And I just want you to sit with that for a minute, because sometimes it's hard to imagine that each of us has that kind of impact. For some people, it's hard to imagine that, you know, whatever it is that's your gift or your contribution may not be worthy of that kind of reverence and that kind of impact. But I'm saying this specifically because right now we see people kind of being loose. We see people kind of just doing what they want to do. Some of the veils have been lifted. Some of the facades have been set back. And we kind of just see people not presenting the perfect parts of themselves. We see people not necessarily presenting the parts of themselves that are all pulled together and perfect and ready for presentation. We see the parts of people that are the pieces that maybe we didn't know existed, the things that maybe we didn't know were going on with people, the areas where people need help and are seeking guidance. We're starting to see that because right now we're in a space where we have to grab onto something. We have to be able to have, by nature, some sense of security. And I'm saying that that sense of security is in how you identify yourself. I'm saying that that sense of security can't come as long as there are still constructs around who you are and how you operate. I'm saying you can't really liberate yourself to be the greatness that you are when you're constantly concerned about how people perceive your evolution, growth, and change. And so what I'm saying is, instead of letting other people present to you what that evolution, growth, and change looks like, you start to construct that, you know, and be able to curate that and share that with people and say, this is what it is, and be unapologetic about it. And why is this an important conversation right now? This is an important conversation right now because being unapologetic about who you are is only going to bring forth the actions that allow you to share from your real self, that allow you to share from how you want to be perceived, that allow you to share from how you want to be seen, how you want to work and function in your daily life, how your lifestyle will go. What are the things that you eliminate and get rid of? And what are the things that you call in? You can't move from that empowered space if you're still questioning who you are, or if it's good enough to be that, or if you're having some lack of confidence about who you are, if you're not feeling that who you say you are is actually who you are, you can't really function in the world with that kind of power. And the reason I know this is because we all have that moment of choosing. We all have that moment of choosing, like, am I going to be who I really am and walk in the door with that? Or am I going to be able to have other people tell me what it is, and then I kind of mold and shape and fit myself in that box? And especially for my community, y'all, we have been code switching so freaking long. You know what I'm saying? Like, just trying to be successful and saying, you know, this is who I am when I'm around these people. And then this is who I am when I'm around these people. And you know, and then this maybe can be who I am if I get invited into this crowd. Y'all, we got to stop that, because what it's really doing is watering down the potency of who we came here to be. We came here to be full, whole people. We came here to be the realization and the embodiment of holism. That's why we are working on ourselves. That's why we are seeking out teachers. That's why we do things that, you know, can bring fulfillment to us. We're seeking holism as humans. And in order to seek holism, you have to be able to know what that is for yourself. You have to be able to know, hey, I don't really think that this suits me. This doesn't really fit with me. This is not who I am. You know, and I can say, You know, I am Stacey Patrice because I've already defined that for myself. I have completely defined that for myself. But at the same time, Stacey Patrice is not holding an umbrella and a construct around me where I can't evolve. And the moment that it does, I will have a different name. Know that. Because a lot of times the energy and the frequency that we put out is saying, you know, what we're going through. And I can definitely say that even in your own identification, you can look at the things that you've done and you can accept your shadows and you can accept your mistakes and you can be in a position where you say, it's okay that that happened because that's who I was at the time. It's okay that I went on this trajectory because I was trying to get myself back together. So identity doesn't speak to mistake or, you know, success. It doesn't speak to that kind of polarity. Identity really speaks to how you share who you are with others and how you function in that definition for yourself. So in the beginning, I saw quite a couple of comments. I'm gonna go back and see if I can scroll back through a few comments where people were sharing. Like I think one of the first comments said, I am a Black American, I identify as a Black American woman. And there's nothing wrong with that. If that's your current identification, which is accurate, there's nothing wrong with that. But ask in anybody's identification that is kind of broad for the purpose of today, ask yourself if we really know what that means. Or is that something that's been, you know, shared with us about what that means, right? And I'm asking that because I want you to be able to define for yourself what that is. Not, you know, Black people in America have this experience, or, you know, Black people are bound to only be this successful, or Black people are only bound to be this healthy, or only bound to be this intelligent, or this whatever. And then you're finally, you know, you're constantly living your life trying to always fight other people's perceptions of what that is, right? Constantly proving and achieving so that other people know, hey, I say that's not what it is. What if you could choose an identification that empowered you, or maybe that identification does, to just be who you are and share that, and it doesn't get pigeonholed by somebody else's misrepresentation of what that is. And also be really mindful as we're talking about this to only create identifications that you create for yourself. Like, don't choose words that are kind of out there that other people created, especially if they're words that were created to oppress. Don't use those words as part of your identification. It doesn't change the fact that you are those things in terms of, you know, how you were born, or, you know, what most people would say on paper is your identification. But always choose a more empowering identification. Always choose the identification that lifts you up. And this is about going into the imagination space as well. You can't choose an identification from a place that feels flat and, you know, and stagnant. Your identification has to come from a higher mind, a higher awareness, a higher consciousness, and it should be able to lift you up from where you currently are and take you to that next level. You're not waiting for a promotion. You're promoting yourself. You're pulling yourself upward. Someone said, funny that this is the topic. I spent the morning writing about my likes and dislikes from childhood to now to better understand myself and how I've changed through the years. Yeah, that's critically important. That's critically important. A lot of people's identifications moved on from childhood too quickly, unfortunately or fortunately, right? A lot of people I know have been, you know, forced to be adults too soon, or have too much responsibilities or too many burdens too soon, which essentially means that your identification as an adult or as a caretaker or a person who has work to do and people to please has kind of shaped the way you see yourself and the way that you present in the world. And it doesn't necessarily benefit you. And so when you start to realize that who that identification benefits, you may want to reclaim some things, right? If you became a people pleaser and the people that you please love that about you, ask yourself if you love that about you. Is that taking care of you? And this goes back to illuminating self-love, which is the topic we did a couple of weeks ago. Also goes back to self-study and the art of self-study, which is the topic we also did a couple of weeks after that. So it's just kind of like, are your identifications serving you? Are they giving you the ability to be able to expand? That's really what we're talking about, is expansion. I see another identification. I am a searcher. I am a big thinker and problem solver who is seeking healthy connections with others. I love that, because sometimes your identification has to be a sentence, because it helps to bring forth the ideas in a way that you flow with them. It's not necessarily this static definition or this term that is really speaking to, you know, who you are. I am a diplomatic, compassionate, understanding, thinking person. Absolutely. Like, you're starting to use adjectives to kind of, you know, describe how you function and how you flow in the world. And then as you move on from that, it kind of settles on a particular word or particular phrase. So if you are writing, here's something that I want you to look at. In order to transform, I believe there are 3 C's that allow us to transform and to evolve. And those 3 C's, as I've written them and I understand them, are clarity, courage, and compassion, right? So we're talking about clarity, courage, and compassion. Why are clarity, courage, and compassion necessary to evolve? My answer to that is, once you get clear, and today we're speaking about clarification as it relates to identity, once you get clear about who you are, how you function, how you move, and how you see yourself, then you have the ability and the courage to walk into the world, step into a world that celebrates and honors and reveres that person on your own terms. It doesn't mean you make other people revere it. The courage is demanding that by your walk. It's by demanding that who you are be somebody who can be seen and heard and acknowledged as somebody important and worthy, that you constantly walk in the world with that frequency, right? And then the compassion comes when other people disagree, or other people haven't found that station in life, or other people don't choose to see you in your fullness. This is not something we need to any longer be mad about. We don't need to fight people for their ignorance. We need to get to the place where we start to look at who we are as being enough, as being full enough, that if we just walk in courage of that, the world has to bend, right? Because we're all doing it. You know, and a lot of times we talk about how we can present ourselves and will it be accepted? Will I be able to be successful? Let me just share what it looks like to me in my imaginative space. When we start being who we are, we actually get true and real diversity. Right now, diversity is a joke, right? And the joke of diversity is we believe that just because people come from different backgrounds or, you know, different skill sets, that it is not, in some way we are representing everything. In some way we have the spectrum of things. Oh, if we throw one person in, we have the spectrum now. That's not diversity in my world. In my world and in the soul healing world, diversity is everybody being authenticated as themselves. It's in saying, this does not suit me. I don't care if everybody is doing this. This is not me. And it's not about stirring the pot and causing trouble. Because remember, you don't have to fight, you know, other people about what your identity is when you have the courage to walk it. It's about the idea that who you are starts to bend perception. It starts to bend understanding. It starts to awaken and help other people who've never seen this before evolve. It helps people to broaden the spectrum of what's possible. And it also helps people to understand that they can have the same courage to be who they are. And it's not necessitated upon who other people are being or what's trendy at the time. So we're not talking about the trend. We're talking about the underground. We're talking about what happens before you present yourself. What happens before people really get a grip of who you are. And if you're anything like me, most of my life, people don't understand me. And it's always been comical to me because it's never been anything I've been too heavily concerned about. And I like the idea that many people see me as many people. That's okay. You know, like some of you all here know me in particular ways. Some of y'all don't know me at all, and it's okay. But it doesn't change the fact that universally I'm able to connect to anybody who shows up in the space where I am. I don't feel like there are barriers between me and other people because I'm clear about what I'm made of. And if I'm not clear about what I'm made of, these interactions with other personalities and other people help me to bump into more parts of myself. They help me to awaken into, oh, I'm that too. Oh, I didn't even know I had that. You know, this person inspires me not because I'm just looking at them and they're an idol and I'm trying to be like them, because they're reflecting back to me what I am. They're showing me what's inside that maybe I haven't spent enough time, attention, or taken a look at, right? And so identity becomes this like moving, evolving definition that has to somehow encompass who you are so that you walk around with that security, right? That nobody can negate that. And you know where you belong and where you don't based on that identity. And so I'm saying now that you will see a trend of people seemingly becoming more tribal during this time. You know, there will be polarity of, you know, like I said in the beginning, whether you are this or are not this. It's a yes or no. It's a black and white kind of thing that's happening that this time is representing, which is unfortunate because I feel like we've done so much work to be included and to be one, and we're starting to see that polarization kind of strengthen. And so what we can do in the midst of that polarization is be more defined in who we are so that we don't get caught up in which way the needle sways. We don't get caught up in which way people go. We are more resolute in which way we go. So I'm gonna check out some of these comments. I've seen them popping up. If the shoe fits, wear it. I'm a writer, I'm a storyteller, I'm a harmonizer, I'm a diplomat, and I connect through humor. That's perfect because what you're essentially saying is I understand these words to connect with me, but I also understand that humor might be the way in which I do everything. So when you're identifying in this way and you realize that you connect in a particular way, pay close attention to that, right? Because the way that you connect is typically speaking of like, what is that thread that allows you to be who you are in the world? What is that thing that is like a gift for you that you realize that everybody doesn't have, but people may need, that allows you to connect? And so even if those titles change, you know, even if the understanding, like a writer, that can change. A writer can be a storyteller, but a storyteller doesn't always have to be a writer, right? So even if these things start to change, you get the pure essence of who you're being. You know that you are humorous and that you are a harmonizer. So those things help to connect. So great answers here. I am an empathic seer and dope soul. Yeah, and you know what? I would say even stretch out what a dope soul is, because I love that phrase. Like, I know what that means to me, but get deeper into that. What makes you a dope soul? What is it that you do? And this is not about what you give to the world. What is it about who you are that you recognize through being in the world that makes you dope, right? Like, what are you not seeing elsewhere that is like you have in spades? Let's see. Definitely a people pleaser through childhood and adolescence. Now I simply want me. I crave myself and want myself being pleased with who I am and what I bring into the world. That is so rich. And thank you, Tiffany, for this comment, because to crave yourself is something that I think most of us have not really had the time to do, or we didn't value it in the way we're starting to learn to value it now. It's something that is kind of intangible for people. Like, what does that mean when she says she craves herself? This is that talk I don't understand. What does that mean, right? So craving yourself is like, I'm going to say, look at yourself like a lover, right? Like, look at yourself as somebody you just want to return to, somebody you just want to find out more about, somebody you just want to learn and explore more with. You want to get into the world and just get that definition and that understanding. You know, somebody who intrigues you and fascinates you because it's a never ending, you know, kind of wooing that's happening, right? Like, just knowing that I see myself like this and I still don't know everything. And I'm here to live so that I can find that out. And then when I get really juiced up and yummy with that definition and I share it with people, oh man, then we're really doing something. And then when they have spent the time to do that and they share it with me, oh my gosh, you know, like just that kind of really, really emphatic, you know, pleasing. That's like, I'm good with this. And this is where I say about, you know, in yogic terminology, we talk about integrating the shadow. I don't care what mistake you've made. I don't care who did what and when. Who you are is so critical because of what you went through. Whether that is you got initiated into something you didn't want to or you didn't see and it made something out of you, or whether you're moving through that so that you can change your story and your narrative. Listen, all of that stuff is relevant and it's necessary. It's so relevant and necessary to honor your path, to honor where you've been, to honor what made you, what broke you, and what built you. That is so critically important. And I only say that because you can't really be in the truth of yourself if you're living in a facade about what happened back there somewhere, right? Like if you're completely in this space of, you know, this is just who I'm going to create myself to be, and it's not tied to anything, it has no roots, it doesn't reach back, there's no Sankofa, there's no connection to, you know, the work that I've done and how I've gotten here. I'm just going to be here and just call myself a name and hope that works. You can't do that. You can't do that because it has no base, it has no foundation, it has no legs to stand on. And so you have to create those legs if they weren't already there for you. And creating those legs is that courage and that living through and moving through and that compassion, not only that you have with others, but with yourself, so that you can transform. Knowing that it's okay if you don't have the answers, and it's okay if you're not really sure how to navigate that space, but that you give yourself permission and you give yourself sacred clarity that I am doing this and walking this the same way everybody else is. There's no expert on my life. There's no guidebook on my life. There are only guides and lessons along the way. And I'm thankful to wake up every day and be privy to those so that I can continue to evolve and get where I'm going and do it with, you know, purpose and strength, and be a person who can actually leave a legacy, because the legacy is what you live. It's not what you always leave purposely. It's like what you did when you were here, right? So it's like that legacy of, I am a person who always emitted a frequency that allowed whatever came into my space and whatever I broadcasted out to experience or feel like blank, right? Like that's kind of what we're getting down into with this. Black is what Black does. I used to be concerned. Okay, I might be missing a few comments. I'm happy to be defining and remembering what makes me radiate and keeps my energy high. I want people to be happy, but it's not my job to make it happen for them. It's never your job, exactly, to make other people happy. It is your job to be the truest version of yourself. And just as you have to adjust to other people's truest version of yourself, of themselves, they have to adjust to your truest version of yourself. And I think this is important because I think sometimes we make up fake rules, right? We make up rules about what we allow other people to do so that they allow us to do the same thing. And we got to stop that, right? Because sometimes we'll be like, well, I don't want nobody holding me back, so I ain't gonna hold nobody back. Is that really true though? Like, do you really care about other people holding you back more than you care about holding them back? Like, I'm saying this in an example of like in relationships, right? Sometimes we create fake rules that allow us to have the freedoms we want. It's not really about the other person, but we say it is. We say, you know, I believe in everybody having their freedom, you know? And really what you're saying is, I want everybody to give me my freedom. It's not really about that, right? And so we have to start to define, like, you know, what are the things that make us float and make us expansive? And then how does that, you know, continue to evolve that definition of who we are and how we see ourselves? I see a question. What about identities that you know are true about yourself, but aren't things you like or want to be? Ooh, good one. So my question always is, and this is a great writing assignment for anyone who's writing, where did the identity come from? You got to trace the identity back, right? Because saying that an identity is true about yourself comes from the idea that it arose from something or from somewhere. Is this identity that you made up as an embryo or as a child? No, it is not. So somewhere that identity came into being. And so you have to ask yourself, where did the identity come from? Who assigned me the identity? Did I assign it based on some disappointment or something I saw of myself? Or did it really come from people constantly telling me, this is what you don't do well, or this is who you are? You know, did it come from astrology or a personality test? Where did the identity come from? That is the most important question about trying to really decide if it's really true about yourself, right? It could be something you don't like or want to be. And then it might be something in that message that you need to denounce, right? But the question is, where did it come from? Were you born into it? Was it given to you? Was it assigned to you? Was it something that you felt defined you at a time where you didn't have definition, and so you just accepted it? Like, pay attention to that. So I'll give you an example of one that, you know, I think is really, really, really key. So let's say you've been on a job, you got a degree, you've been on a job for a particular amount of years, right? And so every time you get a new job, You say, well, I've done this well, so I'm going to carry that as my role. That's who I am. And I take it to the next one. And I want them to pay me to do that. And that's who I am. And then I take it to the next one. And I want them. And then in order to get a new title, they have to promote me. They have to tell me that I'm good enough and I have the credentials to step up, right? They have to say to me, I have to work my tail off for them to say to me, this is who I am. And now I can be this other identity. So we're not even talking about identity. Those are roles. We're not talking about identity. If it's on a name badge or on a nameplate or on the door or a sticker, these are like roles. It's how maybe the world identifies you and what it is that you share with the world, right? But the question then becomes, what happens if you make that your identity? You get stuck in the space of other people define for me when I transform and when I move up. And if I don't allow other people to define that for me, I might not feel worthy in what I'm doing because I can't get out of this identity that I have carried and been trapped in, right? If you've done something for 20 years, you can still do something new next. It doesn't mean that what you've done for 20 years is who you are. It might be how you function, but it doesn't mean it's who you are. So it's like really paying attention to that and saying, what are the things that I really am? So I teach people in my workshops a lot, and man, I miss my workshops. So y'all, thank y'all for being here. I often talk to people about choosing identities that don't have a role in it. And this is to me the purest way that I get to the identity. Choose identities or get to the core of an identity that doesn't have a role in it, which means you're not required to do anything to be that person other than to live in the fulfillment of that identity. And the identity may have you go out in the world and do certain things, but let's use now as an example. Some people's identity sitting on their couch watching this live is a question mark because they're not doing the things that they normally do. They're not in the roles that they're normally in. They've possibly lost a job or lost income or something. They don't have the clients they used to have. So they say, that's not who I am anymore. So I don't know who I am. And this is why I want to talk about this, because I think it's so critical to realize there is still something in someone you are, even when you're not behaving or performing in a role. You are still somebody, and I hate to sound cliche, but you are, you are still a gift to the world. You are still a spark in the universe. You are still a life force. You are still an energy that so many people are waiting to emerge. You are still the embodiment of divinity right now in your house, sitting here watching this. You are still that. And so you have to really ask yourself, who is that person? What is the identification of that person? So I tend to use words that, like I said, don't have an action. So this is the assignment for today. I don't care if you brainstorm a whole page full of words that talk about the identities. Write them all down. Get it out. Spit it out. Write a whole page of all your identities. They might start off demographic. Then they might go into, descriptors or things people say about you, or jobs that you've taken, or jobs that you've chosen, or, a field that you've chosen to go into. Start writing all that crap down. And then when you get to the place that you're like, I don't know what else to write, that's typically when the real identity comes in. It comes into the room through space. It does not come through thinking and trying to make it happen. It comes when you create that space. So once you create that space, you may realize that your identity is something as simple as a divine collaborator. It doesn't tell you how you collaborate. It just says that I take the gifts that I have and find things to join with those gifts. I find ways to find that energy in other things and join with that. I connect with things on a similar frequency of how I understand myself. If I understand myself to be a person of light, or a person of trial, or a person of curiosity, then I start to gravitate to the things that give me that experience. I start to gravitate to the places and the people who give me that experience. Some introverts may have a harder time with this topic because it requires you to define how other people will understand you. And as an introvert, that's not typically your priority, is how other people will understand you. And as an introvert, You may know better than extroverts who you are because you don't have that outward lens constantly speaking to you, right? So this is a great exercise for everyone. Get past the role though, if you possibly can. Get past the role, because if your role changes, my hope is that you still know who you are and how you are, that you still know who to be in the face of that. And so for my yogis, this is another layer. For my yogis, when we are in practice in the multitude of ways that we start to understand the true essence and true nature through doing things that we wouldn't normally do. So yogis typically are of service to others, doing things that you don't get the glory and the gratification for, but somehow you still are gravitating towards those things. Even in the sense of when you're in these practices and you're still and you're quiet, that's not the live, that's not that, that's like, it's like we crave that energy, like, turn up. But it's like when you are in these quiet spaces, that's not the energy you're getting. You're essentially reconnecting to that essence that was there before you decided to turn it into an excitable energy, right? What is the essence of what's there? It doesn't mean it's boring. It doesn't mean it's crunchy. And it doesn't mean it's passive. It means you have a certain flow and a certain rhythm that's already there. And that rhythm is hand selecting these things that you experience. It's choosing. I call that soul. Other people call that other things, but I say it's soul. It's not spirit, it's soul, because it's already there and it can't be changed. It's unchangeable. So your soul is constantly projecting to you what there is to imagine, what there is to experience, what there is to feel and learn and connect to things that you can't explain. What is there is, I'm going to call it a technology or architecture that you didn't create with your hands. So again, this goes back to this not doing. If you didn't create it with your hands and it was already there, then how can your identification only be connected to what you do? That might be what you do is how others identify you, but who you are is how you identify yourself. And that's the only distinction that I can say in all of this. How you know yourself to be in the world, how you know yourself, the essence of yourself is your identification. And how that looks to other people based on who they are is how they're going to create an identification for you. Does that make sense? I hope this makes sense. My favorite identification, I say this all the time, is I am soul expressed. And it's the most clear, it's so clear to me. It might not be clear to anybody. It's so crystal clear. I am soul expressed. I don't know myself when I'm not expressing. Now that is a doing, but expressing is also a being, right? I understand it as a being. If I wake up, the way that I fashion myself, the way that I speak, the tones of voice I choose to use and the ones I choose not to are all expressions of my soul. There are so many ways that I can alter and change myself to fit what I think would be most appropriate or pleasing to others. But I literally sanitize who I am every time I make that choice. Are y'all understanding what I'm saying? It's a possibility that the most potent part of you is trying to speak forward, but you keep erasing it and sanitizing it and saying, I need to make this more polished. I need to refine this more. This is not going to make me my millions. This is not going to get me to the top. This is not going to get the clout I'm looking for. And that's you doing that. Now, the compassion comes in. I understand why one would do that. I understand completely why a human would sanitize who they are in order for success. Especially in America, I completely get it. But I'm going to say, see if there's another way to do that. See if you believe in your heart and your mind and your spirit that you being who you are has a place in the universe that maybe nobody has been courageous enough to walk into yet. That you might be changing the frequency, you might be changing the direction of the wind just by being who you are. But you got to be able to explain that to yourself because you have to know who that is. It is not really for other people. That's the whole point. It's not really for other people. They're going to catch the frequency of you knowing who you are. And that's how they're going to get all the messages they need to get. But you just be who you are. And that's how you're going to get all the glory and all the blessings of what belongs to you. And knowing that nothing passes you that belongs to you. And knowing that there's an entire place for you in this universe. And there are places that, you know, if you say you're this, there are places for that too. If you choose this identity, there's places for that too. But that you truly and fully have a place, a specific place in the universe. Being who you are, that does not require any system or any validation to be it. Now, here's an example. I'm going to use hip hop because I'm a hip hop head. And so I'm going to use this as an example of what I've been seeing. So as we've been going through this self-isolation, a lot of us, the most exciting things that are happening on a device, right? And if that's the case, I even challenge you to make some of those more exciting things happen, like what Tiffany was saying early, like craving yourself, like turning the devices off sometimes and getting with, you know, who you are in your own space. But let's just go back to this device example because I think more people can relate to it. Hip hop has been around since, you know, I'm not gonna say since I was born because that's not true, but like in that area, right? It's been around my whole life, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I understand it. But it didn't become popular until I was like an adolescent, right? So what I'm saying is that think about something innovative. Think about something innovative like hip hop. That somebody being who they are in their neighborhood and using other tools to help tell the story, to help share or in some way exalt this life that they've been living in a way that's attractive to other people, became a phenomenon and took over the world. This is what I was saying in the beginning when I said, you being who you are is diversity, and it is so critically important that until you become it, it holds other people back. You are stealing from us when you don't decide to be who you are. I want you to think of yourself as that urgent. You are stealing from the rest of us by not shining your authentic light and not being who you are. So if somebody would not have said, let me check out this turntable and see what it sounds like to scratch and run things back, that whole art form of DJing. Let me see what it's like to spin on my head and see the kinetic force of energy moving through my body in a way that when I am trusting and I get these mechanics together, I am one with the universal force. Like, if somebody would have never said, if I arrange words in a way that rhyme, just like they have, you know, throughout history, and I allow those words to be set to a rhythm that gives my cadence a vehicle to be heard and to get people to time travel with what I'm saying and listen to my story so that it's more interesting, we would not have this art form. And then once the art form was here, look how many people gravitated to it. Look how many people said, I can do that. Look how many people said, I want to do that for a living. I don't want to do nothing else but that. Or how many people say that's the kind of music I want in my space. That's how critically important being who we are is. It's not just about being an artist, it's about being who you are. And being who you are might be someone who creates art. It might be someone who innovates. It might be someone who creates a business that helps millions around the world. But what I'm saying is, get there. Take the time to get there. I always say it's important to take the time to heal your soul. This is why. Get there. Spend the time writing, looking at your ideas and your reflections. You know, spend the time hearing those reflections. Spend the time really saying, you know, I don't really know if who I've been is really where I want to continue. This is the time to do it, you all. This is the time. This is the time where you take a hard left or a hard right, or you just keep going straight and say it's the easiest thing to do and this is where I was, so let's go. But this is really about having the opportunity to choose for yourself what makes the most sense. So I want to share just a couple of more comments I saw come in a bit ago. And then if you all have anything else you want to say in the comments, please share that. Because again, like anything else, it helps others. I had to learn to get comfortable with the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm three-dimensional. I am not one thing. So I allow myself to be. It's a matter of taking action. For me, it's a matter of taking action or reacting. Yes, and I like to say the most healthy medicine is to respond. It's not necessarily to react, because that means you're just waiting for something to happen to be who you are. And acting is just, you know, willful. It's just doing because you think that's what you have to do. But responding is like, okay, I'm using the stimuli and information that's before me, and I'm making decisions with myself about whether that's the way that I'll continue or not. It's not necessary. It's a fine line sometimes between reacting and responding, but responding is more inclusive of the bigger picture. It's more inclusive of the entire plan, right? Yours and what you see happening, the circumstances. So it's really you deciding for yourself what that is. Basically, I've learned to be kind and forgive myself when I misstep and step outside of my authentic self. I genuinely want to harmonize with people, but that doesn't always happen. Yeah, and sometimes it won't. And sometimes in the beginning, harmonizing with people is getting your own frequency in order, right? Like if you're not really sure and you're still molding like who you are, then when you go and meet and connect with other people, what essentially happens is they can't even find a place where you connect yet, because you're still changing. You're still a moving target, so to speak. So as you're evolving, you'll meet an array of weird folks because you're moving through this kind of trajectory. And until you get a place where you're like, okay, I'm solid in that, you'll meet a little bit. And that's why sometimes we meet friends along the way, we meet guides along the way, and then at a certain point we just fall out with them. And we're like, what happened? And it's really just the frequency. It's the frequency that you were emitting and that you were on is moving different than their frequency. And that as your frequency is moving, it doesn't match with their frequency. So what you're starting to understand is that your frequency is going a particular place. And that's why it's so important to understand it and make sure that you are about the business of emitting that, not just waking up and being, you know, reactive to whatever's happening or whatever people say. This is really powerful work, you all. I think it's hard to make it tangible for people. You know, I think it's sometimes hard to get people to understand how to do this. And I would say in my life, the number one way to do this is to be quiet and still, however you do that, to carve out space every day to be quiet and still. That's always my answer for everything. But that's truly it. Because when you are quiet, you get to really hear the rhythms and the frequency of everything else. You ever been really quiet and a friend call you and you answer that call and the way that they're talking just ain't what you're trying to do right now? It's just not your frequency. And you're like, I don't know why I got on this call, because you were in a space that was cultivating something. And when you stop it and step out of it, if you're not feeding yourself with the good stuff, then it kind of becomes a frequency that can be averse to what it is that you were building on. So taking that space is really important to those 3 C's: clarity, courage, and compassion. Taking that space helps you to get clear so that you have the courage to say and be who you are, and that you can be compassionate when a mismatch shows up and not just be like, oh, get out of here. You know, like you can actually have the compassion to say, okay, we're not in the same space. And I'm sure, you know, that will or won't change. And I'm okay with letting that play out. I don't have to make it be for me right now just because I'm excited about being that right now, that everybody is not on the path with me at the frequency that I'm on the path. So I would say the other thing other than creating space is writing. Writing is such an important instrument, because as we learned as children, writing is a way to record the impressions that we get without ever having to say them out loud or sharing them. It's a way to get them down and to have a record. It's a record. If you've ever saved anything, you know writing is a record. It's a record of where you were at a time, who you were at a time, what you saw at a time. It is a master book. It's a master tablet to be able to have a journal or to be able to write and be able to say, I know this happened because it came from me and I wrote it. Or I heard someone else say this because I wrote it and wrote their name next to it. It's a way to keep those impressions that live in you and work with you alive. And it's a way to say, I'm going to curate an entire life full of those impressions. And sometimes the work that your soul is presenting to you is how you find out your identity. So I don't want you to be discouraged if you're on this call today and you're like, I'm at the end and I still don't have the words. It's okay, they're coming. You're starting the process. You're making it known that who you are is evolving. and that you might not have physical words for it, but you at least are beginning to establish a feeling that maybe at some point you'll be able to have better definition of words. But I do say for everyone, start that process where you just have all of the words that come to you about your identity, and you can strike through and cross out and circle and highlight and whatever you need to do. Make that an exercise. Check in with that every now and then. This is an important time to document that because we're kind of in the in-between. And there's also a lot of planetary shifts and things going on. So who you know yourself to be right now might be the most potent understanding who you are, and it can also be the most liable to change. So I want you to just leave here today knowing that your identity is tangible to you, but it's changeable from the inside out. And it will always, how other people identify you will always let you know if you are emitting who you think you are, or if they just don't get it because they haven't done the work to get there, right? It's never for you to argue and quibble with people to make them see what you see about yourself. It's only for you to project it outwards. It's only for you to be it and let what matches up with it find you and you find it. And you know what this feels like if you have anybody in your life that you consider a kindred, anybody in your life that you feel like you could just sit and talk to about anything forever. You know, you can just go and explore worlds sitting in your seat right where you are. I hope that in some way these conversations can be that for you. They are that for me. Just knowing that it's a two-way street, that when we are all doing the work we are supposed to do, we have so much more to offer each other, so much more to offer the world, so much more to offer in the ways of richness, right? Going back to the hip hop example, hip hop is back in the forefront again, like original hip hop. Like this quarantine has brought out all of the OGs of hip hop, like every last one of them, you know, like I've seen lives with Chuck D. I never thought I would see that, you know, seeing some of my favorite DJs like Maceo and D-Nice, like doing lives. Like I never thought I would sit in my house and experience that. That was inconceivable a few months ago. And it is now a norm. Ninth Wonder, Fast Auntie Lounge, y'all. Ninth Wonder, you know, like all of these DJs and dope producers and artists who have been doing this without the fanfare or without pure recognition. Like when you find somebody you love doing things like that, y'all Wikipedia them. You know what I mean? Like sometimes it helps to just understand the work somebody has done to be in front of you in the way that they are. Like just let that be the highest understanding of accomplishment. But then when you start to move through their accomplishments, you start to understand how the work that they're doing took so much courage out of them to just show up that way. And I'm gonna use D-Nice as an example because he's a household name right now. I've known D-Nice since, you know, BDP. I've known of him. But the idea is like, he's not new. He's been doing this for decades. And can you imagine that somebody who's been doing something for decades sat in that identity until everybody else understood who they were? Come on, y'all. This is like phenomenal to me, right? Like this is the potential that all of us have. It's that moment where who you are and who you decide not to deny about who you are catches up to other people's frequency in a different environment or in real time. And that's all I'm saying. Stick to it. Be who you are. Know that it is worthy. It has a place. It is urgent. It is powerful. It's promising. Keep sharing with people. Keep educating people by your actions of who you are. Keep letting them know that you plan on being here, regardless of whether they accept it in their narrow definitions or not, okay? And allow your friends and family to know who you are, but also allow your work. This is the most important part that we're on the bridge of with this time right now. Let your work be the greatest speaking piece of who you are. Try to reduce doing work that doesn't fortify. And take your time with it. Don't quit anything, you know, spontaneously that will put you in jeopardy, but slowly start moving towards redefining how you work, how you move, what that's worth. If that means write it down, write. Y'all have to write today. Right. Monitor this throughout your days and your weeks and give yourself permission to have your blow up when the process is completing itself. I saw somebody post, D Nice has spent 30 years being an overnight success. If that's not the deepest connection to what I'm talking about identity right now, y'all, I don't know what is. Do it, and it started from something he just loved to do. He just wanted to do for his people, from service. Y'all pay attention to that. I love y'all so much. Thank you for spending this time with me this Sunday. I'm Stacey Patrice. You can follow me at Soul Yogini SP or StaceyPatrice.com. Have a beautiful week. I love to hear from you. Peace. Next Sunday, 1 p.m. Central Standard.